It's really like a... Spilled my water. Where was I? My mother. Always. I am SP, and this is my video out. Coming out has become sort of a continual way of life, it feels like. Almost like Doctor Who, and it's like I settle in, and then in sort of 5 years I have to regenerate and I sort of discover something new. Well, the first person I came out to was when I was 14. She was one of my best friends in high school, and she was, you know, my 14-year-old high school friend who had gone to sleepaway camp and come back as bisexual. And that was very exciting. I'd never heard the word bisexual before, and I was, in general, very sheltered, which I think can happen when you're a kid who grows up in a place that is, fortunately, very sort of accepting, is you actually you're not sort of faced with questions about yourself and your identity until a little bit later. So I was a child actor, I grew up in the theater, you know, I had a recurring role in a Christmas show that I did every year by a playwright named Charles Bush, who's a wonderful drag performer and playwright. So sexuality and gender were always this like wide open thing for me. I was very lucky in that respect. But there were a lot of things vocabulary-wise that I didn't know. So when I heard the word bisexual, it was very, very exciting. And I told her when we were 14, you know, I think I might be that. And she said, well, you know, who are the people that you're interested in? I was like, oh, I don't know. You know, Clark Gable and Judy Garland. And she was like, well, let's maybe not put a label on anything just yet. 2 years later, after I'd dated, you know, the girls in high school that drama kids date, and one, you know, boy, I did come out as bisexual, and it really, again, fortunately for me, was like it was a non-event, which at the time, being a teenager, was so great, but it's something I've sort of had to reckon with later, that I've had to come out again and again. So I came out as bi when I was 16, and then I went off to college, and when I was 19, I knew that there was something about the way I was living my life and the way I was being received in the world that wasn't authentic to who I was. So I sort of, as 19-year-olds are wont to do, self-detonated. And I blew up a 2-year-long relationship that I'd been in with a woman, and I, you know, got into a really big fight with my then college roommate, who I was in love with, and then I came out as gay, and I really wanted, there was something so decisive about that identity, and I felt that as bisexual, I felt at that age like I wasn't being taken seriously, and that I was being laughed at, and that the people who I was dating, men and women, were being laughed at, and I came out as gay. I decided. But you don't decide, because it's not a choice. After I sort of blew up and reinvented myself, I fell in love with a woman who really challenged my perceptions and understanding of my identity, but also of who I was and what my identity could mean. I felt very, very attached to the label gay, and I still do, in part because, like I said, I grew up in the theater. I love gay culture, and I felt like I felt that by using the term bisexual, I was afraid that people would try to take that culture away from me, or tell me I couldn't have a part in that. But, you know, she showed me in my early 20s, which is a great time to figure oneself out. Any time's a great time to figure oneself out. But for me, it was then that nobody was taking anything away from me. I was only taking things away from myself. So I came out. That was a fabulous conversation with my parents. I was like, all right, I know we've been through this a couple of times. I know we've had a number of lunches about this. But I'd love you to meet my girlfriend. Yeah. And then I was very happy for a time with my life and my identity. But even so, there was still something lingering that I had felt when I was a teenager about who I was. There was something inside me that I felt that the label bisexual wasn't being expressed, and that I wasn't allowing myself to explore and to express. And the distinction that I discovered in myself was that it wasn't actually a label or identity of sexuality or sexual orientation, but it was one of gender. And that even in an orientation or an identity of sexuality that is, shall we say, not the dominant culture, there are still binaries that I was imposing upon myself. And finally, this was about 3.5 years ago. So I was in my, my late, early, mid-20s. I started internally toying with the question of being non-binary. It's interesting, my former college roommate, whom I alluded earlier, later reminded me that when I was in college, I had apparently said something like sort of very dismissive about the concept of being non-binary, about how, one really should just choose to be one or the other. I didn't see an alternative path. I have no memory of saying that. I fully believe that I did. And it makes a lot of sense to me that I did, because I think that's exactly what I was sort of wrestling with in myself. I was telling myself, you have to choose one thing or the other. You just have to. No, you don't. And for about a year, without asking people to use different pronouns for me, or without changing my name, I still, went by my birth first name, which I love. It's a beautiful name. I was internally working through, and, with a therapist and with a lot of, literature that I was reading, with friends who were non-binary or trans. I was speaking with them about their experience and what I was feeling inside, because around then, it was about 2015, I really started reaching a breaking point. It was late 2015, and I had built in my head this masculine expectation that was just crushing me. And then finally, in 2016, I just let it go. And there was like a time then, in late 2015, early 2016, before I had sort of, again, come out, when I was, watching a lot of makeup tutorials and looking up a lot of, what's like really hip and androgynous fashion. I love looking at it. I love watching it. I'm not good at it. And so then I just thought, what I was trying to do was impose another sort of set of rules upon the concept of a non-binary identity. I was trying to create, instead of something that is non-binary, I was just trying to create a third thing. Hashtag Catholic problems. I was trying to create like a Trinitarian alternative to the binary. And then late 2016, the election has happened. All of us, process that in our own ways. And it was very clarifying to me, because I felt very suddenly, clearly under duress and under attack. And, you know, relatives of mine, for example, who had always been right-leaning, who'd always voted Republican, this felt decidedly different. And I saw myself, suddenly it was like I had to see the photo negative to realize the positive. And that's when I came out. I didn't know how to do it, sort of, then. I came out first on social media. It seems to be, you know, the most convenient, easy place to reach all the 1,000 people I sort of know, and the people I know very well. And then I felt at the time, you know, the job that I was in, I was working for a Catholic charity. I loved working there. I loved their mission. I felt that they did good work, but that was not an environment in which I felt I could thrive in exploring my identity. So I found a job that did. And now I work for a wonderful theater company, you know, nonprofit. And I was able to go into my first job interview there, where I just really threw together an outfit that probably should never be seen again. But I was trying, I was learning about myself, and I got to introduce myself, and I got to say, my name is SP, and my pronouns are they, them, their. And that was not an issue, and so that was sort of, that felt like the most decisive way in which I came out, is I built a life, a new life that allowed me to be out. Again, which is I've had the great fortune to be able to do that. In high school, I was obsessed with Grey Gardens, weren't we all? And my mother has been, and is still on my phone, as Mother Darling. I call her Mother Darling. I had been out on social media. I'd been, you know, out to my partner, the wonderful woman I fell in love with, now my spouse. And I'd been out in my job, in my workplace, in my professional life. The only place I wasn't really out was to my family. And part of the reason for that is that because I spent 24/7 as myself at my job and at my home, it just didn't feel that important. But then also I did sort of feel like I've come out to them now 3 times. What are they going to say this time? When I'm like, all right, look, I've got a new one for you. But then I just saw, there was this sort of kismet moment. The house, Grey Gardens, was being sold in an estate sale. And as part of the estate sale, they were opening the house to the public for 1 weekend. For the first time. So, I called my mother. It was a Friday night, and I said, Grey Gardens is open to the public this weekend only. I just found out today. We're going tomorrow morning. I'm taking the train out to you tomorrow morning, and we're driving 3.5 hours out to East Hampton and going to Grey Gardens. And we did. And we had a lot to talk through. There was a lot of still animosity post-election. My mother's never been a particularly political or politically informed person. A lot of the times, I think her politics have been informed by my father's and by her father's. And all she knew is she hated Hillary Clinton. So she voted against her. After that happened, we had the biggest sort of falling out that we'd ever had in our relationship. And it forced her to examine the actual consequences, not just for me sort of psychologically, but tangibly for other people. What are the real world consequences of the vote that she participated in, the vote she chose to cast? And she really atoned for it. in spite of her very outward, very vocal show of regret and apology, there was still a lot of unspoken resentment and tension. So the first 3-hour drive out to Grey Gardens was a lot of resolution of that. Then we were there. We had a fabulous hour where we just sort of got to let everything go, and it was almost like I got one more day in high school with my mom. And we had that, and then because of that, on the way back, I just, I was like, all right, I know we've had these conversations before. I have another one for you. And she had questions, but there were more answers that she found in herself than questions. Answers about, trying to square the circle, trying to reconcile memories of her child that suddenly she didn't have to answer anymore. Suddenly they all made sense. Of, the kid who, was simultaneously, she thought, oh, that's like a normal 6-year-old boy who's obsessed with Star Wars. And then, also in the same breath, obsessed with women actresses of the 1940s. What is that? Or like her kid who would come home from school in the 6th grade and would, watch the Cartoon Network and then watch Lifetime, for the Golden Girls reruns. And who equally, Kate Bornstein, in their book, their gender workbook, New Gender Workbook, said it was very clarifying for me and helped me in my conversation with my mother that, boyhood and girlhood are their own genders, as are manhood and womanhood and everything in between. And so I really did see myself as a boy when I was a little boy, but I didn't understand that I would then, necessarily grow up to be a man. I didn't, when I looked at who my role models were and who I was modeling more adult expressions of gender from, they were just as many adult women as they were adult men. More adult women than they were adult men. And so suddenly, questions that my sexual orientation didn't answer were answered for her. And that was something I didn't expect that was really joyful for me. I thought it was going to be a lot of, I have to explain all of these different intersections of gender identity to you. But no, I was really lucky. She was able to just zoom out and look back and say, oh, that makes sense. I am so fortunate. I live in Brooklyn. I grew up in the theater. I work in the theater. I work in Midtown Manhattan. On Thursday, I was interviewed for a podcast about an article I wrote about trans issues in the theater. And it was this fabulous, affirming hour phone conversation. And when I left my office that evening, 5:15, on 43rd Street in Manhattan, for the first time in 1 year, and I had just had my 1-year anniversary, work anniversary. It had been a year that I'd been there. The first time in 1 year, I got screamed at on the street on 43rd Street. I'm lucky that I was where I was. I'm lucky that I was not actually physically attacked. It really shook me up. And though I do live in Brooklyn, I live I grew up in Brooklyn in a very, Brooklyn Irish Catholic area. I'm a couple neighborhoods over, but it's still one of the more conservative bastions of Brooklyn. Not a lot, but a bit. And for the first time, I got home from work and I was embarrassed to walk through the front door of my building. And I called my spouse and I said, I I need you to let me know that sort of the coast is clear, that I can come in. That just happened to me on Thursday for the first time. I am lucky that I'm not a trans woman of color. I'm not going to be murdered. I could be murdered. I'm not going to be murdered. The likelihood is not the same. So if the question sort of is, what's the most serious issue or pressing issue facing the queer community today? Part of me wants to say that those of us who are perhaps on the more privileged side of the queer community need to recognize what we do have and the solidarity and support that we need to express to those who do not have what we have. And we need to continue to find ways to uplift the parts of our community that are in a lot more precarious danger than we are. I live in New York. My governor, my state senator, they're gonna, protect my rights in spite of sort of a federal onslaught against them. There are people in other parts of the country who don't have that privilege. And that was something I had to grapple with internally, too. After the election, part of me wanted to say, screw it. Like, the United States has failed. Let's dissolve. Let me live in the sovereign nation of New York, where I know that, progress will continue to happen. I wanted to sort of let go of that sense of communal responsibility or collective responsibility. We can't do that, I don't think. I'm getting a little Lauren McCall again. Off the top of my head, that's what I think. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. The thing I love the most about myself and about being SP is that I have never in my life really been afraid to self-examine and to take stock of who I am, how I'm feeling, what I want, where I want to go. There was a time where I was very sort of compartmentalized, and I would be this person in front of these people, and this person in front of these people, and all of those individual people I would be were sort of true, but they were not collective. And then I sort of asked myself, what is the thing that would make me happy now? I was like, if I don't have to worry about who I'm presenting at any time, if I can just always know that I'm being myself. And the willingness to ask myself that question is the greatest gift that I've given myself. And that's what I love most about being me. I keep asking myself questions and listening. So those are my coming out stories so far. And I look forward to checking in again if and when I arrive at the next one. I was a child actor, and my mother got a call from my manager, and my parents are not in the theater. We're never in the theater. We're always very supportive of me, but didn't really know anything about the theater. Got a call from my manager saying, we'd love to audition SP for a workshop of a play by Charles Busch at Manhattan Theater Club starring Patti LuPone. And my mother, I don't know that she told me that it was by Charles Busch. I don't know that I would have necessarily known. I was 11, I was quite young. But I knew Patti LuPone. And I did say, I was like, I must get this or I will die. I must do this. So I went in, and I was lucky enough, it was this amazing experience where I go in to read a scene, and I was reading with the author, Charles Bush. And I auditioned for thousands of things when I was a kid, but I can close my eyes and really, like, relive that audition. It was such a special experience. Because there's this moment of sort of instant transference. Like, he saw me, and I was reading for a role that was semi-autobiographical of, like, a young him. And he recognized a kindred spirit in me. And at that time, I didn't really have anyone in my life who could recognize that in me, who could see, you know, that love of old movies and old theater, and, you know, who could help me develop that, cultivate that, develop that vocabulary in myself. And I was cast, and I did it. And there was a line, though, where the play was about a theater camp. It was about all of the adults in the theater camp. I was the only kid in the show. And I was sort of like the weird outcast kid. And finally, you know, the Patti LuPone character encouraged me to audition for, you know, the musical Finian's Rainbow, which I loved and was so excited to audition for. And I wanted to play Og the Leprechaun. And I didn't get cast. And Patti LuPone asked me, why? What did they say? And I said, they said I was 2, and the line is effeminate. But just to show just how little of a vocabulary in terms of gender I had no idea what that word was. People coached me on it, but then we get to the actual workshop performance, and I say, they said I was too effeminate. And then I have Patti LuPone whispering in my ear, effeminate, 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 effeminate. And so finally I go, oh, effeminate, to everyone, which feels like a defining moment for me, where I'm like, I don't know what this is. Oh, effeminate. Effeminate. Oh.
It's so good.
I mean, literally like, the clouds open up. But truly, I have Patti LuPone whispering in my 11-year-old ear, effeminate, effeminate.